Perron family's haunted farmhouse. Ed and Lorraine investigated the Perron family's farmhouse in Harrisville, Rhode Island, which was allegedly haunted by evil spirits. The Perron family, including Roger and Carolyn Perron and their 5 daughters, moved into a farmhouse in Harrisville in 1971, where they claimed to experience a series of paranormal events. The family reported seeing apparitions, hearing strange noises, and experiencing poltergeist activity, including objects moving and beds levitating. On August 22, 1973, Ed and Lorraine captured footage of Carolyn Perron, the family matriarch, allegedly becoming possessed by an evil spirit. The footage shows Carolyn's eyes rolling back, her voice changing, and her body contorting in unnatural ways. Andrea Perron, the oldest of the Perron children, said, "These were spirits who had an attachment to the property. 8 generations of one extended family had lived and passed at the farm, and some of them had never left. My mother did historical research and found that virtually every entity we were able to name had, as living beings, either passed by their own hand or passed so traumatic a passing and so sudden a passing that they actually didn't seem to know that they were even gone." The Perron family's experiences, along with the Warrens' investigations, served as the basis for the 2013 film The Conjuring, which dramatized the events, of course. Now, in real life, the Warrens' investigation of the Harrisville case came to an end when Roger Perron ordered them to get the heck out of the house after a very dramatic seance in which Carolyn began speaking a strange language and levitated out of her chair. Andrea Perron said the only time she was ever truly frightened was during the seance, and went on to continue to say that there are no words to adequately express that event. In the years following their investigations in Harrisville, the Warrens would look into many more alleged hauntings, but Ed said that he never forgot the time they spent with that family. Next up, we have the elusive White Lady of Union Graveyard. The White Lady is said to be the ghost of a woman named Elizabeth, who passed under very mysterious circumstances in the late 19th century. According to legend, Elizabeth was unalived by her husband, and her spirit has been seen wandering the cemetery dressed in a very long white gown. However, some believe she is actually Harriet Seeley, whose young son passed shortly after being born, and Harriet herself passing soon after. This legend believes she may have passed in hopes of finding her son and still wanders their final resting place searching him out. Now, others believe she is actually the ghost of a woman from the 1940s who unalived her husband and later herself and is doomed to wander the graveyard. So it's possible that she's these 3 different women. However, one thing that's for sure is that her physical description is the one thing that remains consistent. She is a young woman wearing a white dress with dark hair. Many who have witnessed her believe they have almost hit her with their vehicle, only to find no trace of her once they actually pull over. Others claim they have often seen her hovering slightly above the ground around the cemetery, going back and forth amongst different gravestones. Union Cemetery is actually located in Easton, Connecticut, and the Warrens investigated the cemetery in the 1970s and captured several photographs of her. Lorraine used to often take walks through the cemetery, saying that it was one of the most haunted places around. Ed and Lorraine believed the White Lady was a residual haunting imprinted on the location by the traumatic events surrounding the passing. Now, they compiled their findings into a 1992 book called Graveyard: True Hauntings from an Old New England Cemetery. Ed Warren, who also investigated the Amityville Horror House, reportedly caught the White Lady in photographs as well as videos. Now, Lorraine Warren told NBC Connecticut in 2008 that the video evidence is so valuable she kept it locked away at their occult museum. The Smurl haunting, the general story of the Smurls, is a familiar one about parents trying to find stability and just do what's best for their family. After they were displaced by Hurricane Agnes in 1972, Janet and Jack Smurl moved their family to the West Pittston home, and not long after, they claimed to have experienced uncanny incidents. Items would disappear, doors would open and close, toilets would flush, they'd lose sleep over growling noises and just horrific stenches. Now, over the years, the Smurls said that the paranormal attacks worsened. Jack claimed to have actually been SA'd by a spirit, and the entities attacked the children even the family dog. Eventually, after the Catholic Church kind of slow walked an investigation, the Smurls decided to go to the press, which created a media frenzy. Now, writing about the sensation for a 2016 Halloween story in Pittston Progress, reporter Jack Smiles actually summarized the immense media attention. After the Smurls went public with their, descriptions of what was happening in their modest half-double home on Chase Street in West Pittston, their story became a media phenomenon, going viral the old-fashioned way through print and television. Now, local and out-of-town stations and papers covered it widely. Wire Service's stories ran in major dailies from New York to California, and in 1974, the Warrens investigated the Smurl family's home in West Pittston, which again was allegedly haunted by malevolent spirits. Now, the investigation was documented on audio and videotapes. On January 8th, 1975, Ed and Lorraine actually captured footage of a very mysterious, unexplained event during their investigation. The footage shows a strange glowing light moving around the Smurls' living room. The light is accompanied by unexplained noises and movements, and the footage was deemed actually too intense and too disturbing for public consumption. Ed Warren reportedly described the footage as one of the most frightening things that he's ever seen. In June 2017, Jack Smurl actually passed away. His family's history and story earned him rather lengthy bits in the local papers. Looking back, on the period of their lives that earned them international attention, Karen Smurl said of her father in the Citizen's Voice, "We had such a hard time and nobody to turn to. He was happy I was a voice out there for people who need help." Lastly, we have the Annabelle doll. Most of the movies set in the Conjuring universe, including Annabelle, are interestingly inspired by true events. The Conjuring movies are based on the case files of famed demonologist couple Ed and Lorraine Warren, who looked into numerous paranormal incidents, including the controversial true story of the Amityville haunting. One particular case, the Annabelle doll, has been the subject of 3 movies. All 3 films deal with a different event in the doll's timeline. So the Conjuring universe begins with the first movie, which focuses on Ed and Lorraine Warren investigating the paranormal case. Now, this follows the Warrens' investigation of the Annabelle doll featured in the movie. The doll actually received its own spin-off trilogy, which explored Annabelle's origin and the negative events that occurred when the Warrens took her. Since the franchise stretches the doll's story into 3 movies, the writers took creative liberties. Now, most of the films are fictionalized, however, small portions of the trilogy have come from the true story of Annabelle. The legend has it that a student nurse named Donna received the Annabelle doll as a gift from her mother in 1968. Donna and her roommate Angie began to notice strange paranormal occurrences. It would change positions unexpectedly, show up in different rooms of their apartment. The doll would also leave notes for the girls with messages like "help me" scribbled on them. They became very alarmed when they found red liquid dripping from the doll. Donna and her friend Angie had a medium take a look at it. The medium determined that the doll was possessed by the spirit of a 7-year-old girl named Annabelle Higgins. Now, the girls contacted the Warrens, who concluded that the spirit haunting the doll was not a 7-year-old child. Instead, it was actually a demon who had fooled the girls. Now, the Warrens believed that the demon's goal was to acquire Donna's soul. The Warrens solved their problem by taking the doll with them, but they encountered continuous car trouble on the way back to their home. Now, the demon within the doll rejected an exorcism, and in the end, it was actually put in a glass case in the Warrens Occult Museum in Connecticut. However, in 2014, the museum started facing legal issues because it operated as a commercial property in a residential zone. The museum officially shut down to the public in 2019 after the passing of Lorraine Warren, raising questions about the current location of Annabelle. As of 2023, the doll is still located in the Warrens' collection at the house where the museum used to operate. Personally, the Smurl haunting is the one that sends chills up my spine for me, but which one freaks you out the most? Let me know. Thanks for watching. I'm your host Ashley, and until next time, stay scared. Starting with the battered VHS tape, this story comes from a person on Reddit who claims that the story is true. It starts by them saying that one time in the mid to late 90s, they had a famous relative who would get a lot of fan mail, most of which was just photographs of their dogs, friendship pendants, etc. Not super weird stuff, but some a little creepy and almost stalkerish. Like, they said one day a padded envelope arrived and in it was a battered home movie tape with a handwritten label on it. Now, they said they never heard of the title, but considered themselves to be a movie buff, so thought that they would just give it a go. They said a few days later they were alone in the house for the night and they thought, what better time to watch this movie? So they locked the doors, got a blanket, made some popcorn, even their stuffed teddy, and pressed play. They said what followed was one of the most terrifying and traumatic experiences of their life.
Starting off this countdown, we have the ghost in the photographs. In this footage, we see Ed and Lorraine Warren discussing a number of cases where they caught photographic evidence of ghosts. The show was hosted by Tony Spira, the Warrens' son-in-law. The first case they talk about revolves around a woman named Gail Martin, who we also see here. Basically, Gail moved into a house and for the longest time, nothing spooky happened. Then one day she was out digging in the backyard and gardening. Her husband took a photo of her doing so, and when it developed, you could see a white silhouette of a ghost.
Years ago it was taken.
There it is.
Okay, here it is,
Tony. Now, you see that Gail is higher than that woman.
Then we have a second photo taken of Gail on the same day. And again, we see the same ghost in the shot.
Now, as you notice, Gail turns around and Gail is smiling. And because her husband is saying something funny. So at that point, the woman is smiling and she puts her hand up to her mouth in that manner.
Unfortunately, since it's old footage, it is hard to see the ghost in the photo, like its face. It just kind of looks like a white blob. Now, Lorraine actually made contact with this ghost, and that's when we learned about her sad story. So according to Lorraine, the woman in the photograph once had a child who she absolutely loved. She even built a place for him on her property for him to stay, so he was always close to her. Then one summer he was working at a children's camp when there was a polio epidemic. Sadly, her son contracted polio and 3 days later passed away. The mother was extremely heartbroken by this. So when she passed away, she stayed attached to this piece of land. Now, when Gail started gardening, the ghost made herself known because someone was working on the piece of land that was sacred to her.
Is out in the yard, in the garden, and now you're doing something to improve that. After all of these years probably of neglect, now you're going to be fixing it. And I believe that that is the reason she's there.
The next ghost that they talk about, though, is not as nice as the first one. Let's take a look at it.
Above the chair, right?
Right above the chair.
Right.
Now, this is in the lowest level of that property, but they did have a lot, unlike Gail, they had all sorts of infestation.
So the couple who owned this house witnessed really dark paranormal activity, and that's when they contacted the Warrens for help to get this evil spirit out of their house. And lastly, we have the Providence ghost man. This next ghost that they are going to be talking about is of a soldier in World War II. The story is very sad and scary.
His wife was informed that he was killed in action, not even missing, that he was actually killed in action.
And then a week later she committed suicide.
She committed suicide, and 1 week after that, he was found alive.
That is just heartbreaking. His wife literally took her own life thinking her husband died, when in reality, he was just missing in action. Both of the ghosts are said to be attached to that home still. In fact, no one has moved into that home since. If you look at the top right of this next clip, you'll see the ghostly image of this man.
No one ever occupied that cottage again.
Now that looks like a man,
Yes,
but we have other photographs which look like a woman.
yes, we do.
So where you have one spirit, you have many other
more than
spirits.
one, yes.
Moving on to number 4, we have the cursed objects. And if you guys are liking this video so far, then smash that like button because it really helps us out.
Many of the objects in this room here have had dire effects on people. People have been maimed, have been killed. People have wound up in mental institutions because of many of the things they write in this building here.
Now let's head on over to the Warrens Occult Museum. In this interview, Ed talks about how dangerous their museum really is and the number of people that have died or have been severely harmed after visiting it.
Raggedy Ann doll, which was responsible for the death of a young man who came in here one time, who challenged the doll to do its worst, and it did. Then you have a detective who was almost killed right in this room that we're standing in.
Now, the Warrens had a strict set of rules. They told visitors not to touch anything in the museum whatsoever. This is because their aura mingles with the object's aura and it can easily latch onto them. Next thing you know, you're bringing that demon home with you. Anyways, this is the process Ed will take you through if you do end up touching anything.
If anybody touches anything in this room, their aura mingles with the aura of that object, which is very evil. I would then tell them to close their eyes. I would vision them in what we call a Christ light, make the sign of the cross over them so they take nothing out of here. That's just a precaution that I always use.
As cool as the museum sounds, you'd never catch me there. In fact, according to Tony, when he arrived with the camera crew, the spirits were upset and decided to shut off all the lights on them to tell them that they were upset.
Well, we were starting to film, you mean, just as Rob was coming to us to start the interview, every single light went out. Every single light went out without any kind of jolting, just died. And then, what, 2 minutes later it came back.
That was a warning to get out of here.
So I think it's just about 9 o'clock at night. I think it's
And we
time.
should leave.
The way that Ed said that gives me the creeps. Like, yeah, it's time for you to go. The demons want you gone. Yikes. In our third spot today, we have the Warrens Museum. Again. The Warrens Museum is just filled with cursed and deadly items that literally could kill you. In this next video, you'll see just how dangerous and scary the museum really is, if you didn't pick up on that already. You'll be taking a look at one particular doll called the Shadow Doll, or Doll of Shadows.
And there are many what we call death dolls here. The doll you see here was made through black magic rituals. It's called a Doll of Shadows. Now, why is it called a Doll of Shadows? We'll take a look at it.
This doll is absolutely terrifying. Like, if you thought Annabelle was bad, this doll is 1,000 times worse.
It has human bones here and there and animal parts all over the body. You notice the nails in here and the tooth sticking out. Well, these are all feathers from crows and whatever. But this, I can tell through psychometry and through how it was made, that it was made with evil purposes.
So yes, this doll is composed of human bones and hair and teeth. The owner was using it for dark rituals, and in the end, the doll became possessed by a very powerful and malevolent demon. In fact, the way in which this doll was used is horrifying.
Now the purpose is this, that they take a picture of this doll, they send it to you, and they put the curse on the back. You take it and you look at it and you laugh at it, but it's not a laughing matter. Because once you see the image of the doll, it can be projected telepathically to you in your dream state. Dolls like this have actually come into nightmares.
Did you hear that? That is absolutely horrifying. But that's not all. According to Ed, this doll has killed a number of people in their sleep.
These images of these dolls can be so frightening that they've actually stopped people's hearts during the dream state.
Ed then goes on to tell how they got possession of the doll. So a couple ended up getting it for sale at an antique shop. The antique dealer practically gave it to them because it's cursed. But eventually they began to experience intense and horrifying nightmares. They later found out they were having identical nightmares. And one night the husband woke up with huge gash marks on his back.
The following night, it was not only scratch marks, it was claw marks. And very frightening. And they knew of us, they called me up. I went out there and they said, take this doll, please.
The scariest part? The doll can never be destroyed.
You see, you must be very careful with a doll like this. You can never destroy it. If you destroy it, you could have things occur to you that would be horrible. Because the spirits that are within the doll then are freed. And where do they go? To the one that destroyed their home. And this is their home right here.
In our second spot, we have the real-life vampires. According to Ed and Lorraine Warren, vampires are real.
Ed, I'd like to ask you about vampires just to start right off. Are there such a thing as vampires, and can you tell me an example of one?
Positively. Vampires do exist, what we call human vampires.
But they aren't like the stereotypical vampires that we see in movies that are all like, I want to suck your blood. You know, have big fangs and a cape, and they don't look like Edward Cullen, sorry. No, they talk about two different types of vampires. The first being someone that hallucinates and imagines themselves as a vampire and just kind of takes on that role. The other is demonstrated by the Albany case from 1953.
Where the Calbani family had to open up a grave. And a family member had died, and they were saving a little money by digging the grave themselves. When they got down about 4 foot, they struck a coffin which shouldn't be there. It was their private plot.
He goes on to say that the coffin was of antique nature. They opened it up, and there was a perfectly preserved man in there.
And inside was a man about 45 years old. And he was fresh to the touch as though he had just been buried.
That's not even the freaky part. So even though the plot was there, there's a law saying you can't exhume the body until you get a court order. So this process took about a week. And when they went back to the grave, the coffin and body had both deteriorated.
The mother of the family went back and had the ground consecrated. And then they dug up the grave again, and this time, when they opened it up, inside was a corpse that looked as though it had been buried for many, many years, just a skeleton. The coffin itself had greatly deteriorated.
This freaked everyone out. Newspapers got word of the story and it was in the headlines for weeks. People went wild and were like, this is a vampire. And they were right. According to the Warrens, the man in the coffin was a sorcerer and user of black magic and also a vampire. He had put himself into a catatonic state. He was alive, but just barely. Still alive, but I'm barely breathing. And then at night he would leave the coffin with his astral body and find his prey. His astral body was being connected to his physical body by something Ed refers to as a silver cord. So no matter how far he went, he could still make it back to his body.
But while the physical body is still alive, there's a silver cord, a supernatural cord, that emanates from the physical body to the astral body. No matter how far away that astral body goes, if you go 3,000 miles, that cord would still be attached. It's only when that cord, that supernatural cord, is broken, that death comes to that physical body.
So somehow that cord got broken, and maybe that was when the woman got the land consecrated. And that's why the next time they went to the body, he was just bones. Now, you're not gonna believe this next part. I mean, it's hard for me to believe, I'm not gonna lie. So this vampire dude didn't arise from his tomb and go around biting people's necks to suck their blood. No, no, no.
And he would go in search of blood, but he would not bite into anybody's neck. He could take the blood through what we call teleportation, apports. Now today, of course, with all the ways that somebody could get blood, a vampire doesn't have to attack anybody to get that blood.
So vampires literally could be real and among us. They just can get blood sneakier ways, like maybe they work at a blood donation center or a hospital or something. Ever think of that? The Warrens did. And in our #1 spot today we have Annabelle the doll.
All right, I think one of the most famous would be Annabelle. This is a Raggedy Ann doll that's made like thousands of other dolls, except that this doll was used in communication, almost like having a seance.
In this next interview with Ed and Lorraine Warren, they talk all about Annabelle the doll and her origin story. So story goes that a young nurse received the doll as a gift from her mother. She lived with a fellow nurse. The two worked together and lived together. Well, one morning the nurse brought down the doll while they were eating breakfast and placed it on a chair at the table. This was meant to be a joke like, oh haha, she's having breakfast with us. But the next day she did the same thing. She brought the doll down to the kitchen table and sat her down at a chair. And the next day she did this until something terrifying happened.
But the third morning, they're talking to the doll, and the arms of the doll are on the chair like this. Suddenly they went up and onto the table. Now this didn't frighten them, this intrigued them, to the extent that the one nurse said to the other one of the nurses knows a medium. Let's ask her about this. I'll bet you there's a spirit in that doll. That's what they did.
And that was their first mistake. So they did end up taking it to a medium, and the medium informed them that a spirit of a 6-year-old girl who had died in a car accident on the road by their house was latched onto this doll. Surely enough, they searched this and a young girl named Annabelle did pass away in an automobile accident near them. But listen to what Ed says here.
But God does not allow the spirit of a child to go into a doll. This was a demon who was posing as that little child to create sympathy to these two young women, which it did.
It worked, and this demon tricked the girls. They ended up looking after this doll thinking it was Annabelle, the little girl. They would take it out on excursions, buy it clothes, jewelry, etc. But then it started to attack the girls. The scariest thing occurred when the two nurses came back from their shift.
They'd come home after midnight, put the key in the door, unlock the door, and who do you think is standing there? The Raggedy Ann doll.
Standing there.
Now that doll has flimsy legs. If you try to stand it up, you can't.
Hearing Ed say this just sent shivers down my spine. Literally. Just imagine going home and seeing that doll standing perfectly upright. The doll later went on to attack one of the nurse's boyfriends by choking him out in his sleep.
I dreamt that that doll was strangling me. He had marks on his throat. Was it psychosomatic? Well, let's see.
But wait, there's more! The boyfriend ended up picking up the doll and throwing it across the room, and Annabelle did not like this.
Picks it up and throws it right across the room. You're nothing but a rag doll. You couldn't hurt anyone. With that, Tony, 7 psychic slashes appear on his body. Wow. Now, we've seen these kind of slashes. We've filmed them. These slashes come from nowheres. The blood came right through his shirt.
Then finally, Ed and Lorraine Warren got involved and took Annabelle to their museum. Starting off this countdown, we have the Buddhist exorcism. In the early 2000s, the Warrens took a trip to Japan to check out these haunted tunnels that a number of people have died in. But while they were there, they were contacted to perform an exorcism on a woman named Teresa. This footage is very creepy. Not only is it actual footage of someone that is possessed, but you can also hear the demon in her voice reaching out to talk to Lorraine. In this clip I'm about to show you, Lorraine is trying to reach out to Teresa and get her to fight back against the demon possessing her.
Teresa, you hear me. You understand me. Teresa, leave. Leave, Teresa. Leave, dear. Leave. I'm here to help you. I'm here to help you, Teresa.
Things take a turn when Teresa starts speaking in English to Lorraine. I should note that Teresa didn't know English, so clearly it was the demon speaking.
You see your mother? Go with your mother, Teresa. Go with your mother.
Go with your mother.
Go with your mother.
See your mother?
Do you see your mother?
Yes. Go with her.
She speaks English.
Towards the end of the exorcism, Teresa starts lashing out towards Lorraine and others. We see her crawling around and growling like a demon and talking all raspy.
I was here before. That's my house.
I guess the demon was really fighting back because poor Teresa was going through a lot at this point. The footage ends with Lorraine once again telling Teresa to fight back against the demon. Hopefully they managed to complete this exorcism successfully. Now, I tried to Google this case, but unfortunately there wasn't much information out there on it, so we may never know. In fact, it was after this trip in Japan where Ed got really sick and his health started to decline. Maybe this demon had something to do with it. Moving on to number 4, we have Scotland's underground city. And if you guys are liking this video so far, then why don't you hit that like button?
And today, there still are.
They're still haunted.
Yes. There are people like you that see them. In fact, I've never seen them, but there are people that see these ghosts floating about. Mary King's been seen up here, and she's been seen down at the bottom.
In 1996, Ed and Lorraine Warren visited Edinburgh in Scotland to investigate an underground city. The city was said to be haunted. In the video, you see an older tour guide telling them about the history of this underground city, how there used to be underground shops and stuff like that down there. At one point, he talked about getting bad vibes from being down there, and apparently Lorraine was sensing that as well.
That's when you get the funny feeling.
I got funny feeling, all right.
However,
Very bad feeling.
one by one, they all died off until there was nobody left.
It gets worse when he talks about how everyone died down there and there were just piles of bodies because there was no one left to get rid of them. Which is probably why the place is haunted. I mean, a number of people died there and didn't have a proper burial. Well, at one point in the video, Lorraine claims she hears a ghost walking by.
Can it be?
No.
What are you hearing?
Like the sound of people, of more than one person together walking by, and, you know, like heavy clothing rubbing against each other, that type of thing. I could hear.
I'm going home.
And I could hear that, and I wondered, you looked, Frank, so I thought you heard the same thing.
No, I didn't hear it.
Yeah.
That's not all. She started to pick up on another vibe.
It feels like somebody's like squeezing your insides all together, actually. Squeezing the life right out of you.
I have no clue how she wasn't scared to death experiencing all of that. Honestly, she was brave. It blows my mind. In our third spot today, we have the family in Connecticut. And no, this isn't the same as the family from the haunting in Connecticut case. Just apparently, Connecticut has a lot of hauntings. So basically, Ed and Lorraine Warren went to Connecticut to help a family whose home was being haunted by a spirit. What I'm about to show you is real footage from this case. Basically, it starts with Ed and Lorraine sitting at a table praying with the family. Then, Ed tries to make contact with whatever is haunting their house.
Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come.
One knock for yes, two for no. Are you a man? Are you a boy? One knock for yes, two for no. Yes. Okay.
We couldn't sell.
Using that one knock for yes, two knocks for no method, Ed was able to find out more about this ghost.
Most here is it? Is it?
So the ghost was haunting their home and causing a scene because it didn't like the family's mother. But that's not the only ghostly thing that they managed to capture on camera. Later on, Ed asked the ghost to give them a sign, and then the kitchen chair moves on its own.
Give me some sign. Is that you moving something? Give me some sign that you're here. I command you to reveal your identity.
Yeah, no thank you. If that happened at my house, I would be out of there so fast. In our second spot, we have Maurice Theriault. If you've seen the movie The Nun, then you already know about a man named Maurice, or Frenchie. This guy was a hard-working farmer that ended up getting diabolically possessed. This occurred in 1985. Sometimes blood would randomly pour out of his body, like from his nose, eyes, and mouth. And he didn't know what was causing it. He also developed super strength and could randomly understand and speak Latin. At first he went to the police for help, then a priest, and then finally Ed and Lorraine Warren agreed to help him. Now, he apparently went through a number of exorcisms. The footage I'm going to share with you is from his last exorcism. So the footage starts off with Ed asking Frenchie to lift up his shirt. Apparently, random crosses would show up engraved in his skin.
At the front. Feet up in the shoulder? Yeah. Move, yeah, you're in the way, right? Yeah. Okay.
It literally looks like somebody took something sharp and carved crosses into him, and then it scarred up. But those would appear all over his body, randomly appearing and disappearing. During this exorcism, a number of scary things happened. For starters, we see him drooling from his mouth, but as soon as the drool hits his shirt, it turns to blood. Then, at one point, we see Frenchie hunched over in pain. This is apparently because spirits enter people through their solar plexus. And then at another point, we see Frenchie become incredibly still and his face changes completely. He doesn't look like himself. His eyes look so glossy. And lastly, we see a cut randomly appear on his forehead and start to bleed on its own, out of nowhere. That is absolutely horrifying. And in our number one spot, we had the unseen tapes. YouTuber Haley Reese got the chance to actually meet up with Tony Spira, the husband of Judy Warren. He provided her with insight into the Warren cases and actually showed her some unseen exorcism footage. She then uploaded this onto YouTube. In this video, we see Tony and Lorraine Warren performing an exorcism on a man named Roberto. Take a look at it.
This is the power, Jesus Christ. Okay? You hear me? Jesus Christ has all the power. You have none. What is your name?
So in the video, as you just saw, they're trying to find out this demon's name to then help expel it. And guys, you're not gonna believe what demon was inside of him. Here, continue watching.
What is your name?
Jesus Christ commanded you to answer that question.
What is your
What
name?
is your name? Beelzebub? Is that what you're saying? Beelzebub?
This dude was possessed by Beelzebub. When I heard that, I literally got shivers down my spine. Like, holy. So for those of you that don't know, in Christian texts, the name Beelzebub is often associated with the devil himself. They would alternate between using this name and Satan. He is considered one of the 7 princes of hell, and he is associated with the sin of gluttony. In other texts, he's described as the lieutenant of hell. He's second in power to Satan. It's crazy, but hold on. He wasn't just possessed by Beelzebub, but by other entities as well.
What other entity is inside you? God is commanding you. In the name of Jesus Christ, and all the saints, and all the martyrs, and all the angels command you to answer that question. What is it? Abaddon.
I genuinely don't know how they stayed so calm as this dude lists all the demons possessing him. The video went on and they found at least 4 demons were inside of him. They then asked the demons why they were possessing Roberto, and they replied with power.
Why are you in Roberto? Why are you there with Roberto? Jesus Christ doesn't like demonic spirits within a human spirit. Jesus Christ hates demonic spirits to be within a human being. You know that? You hate Jesus, huh?
I don't know about you, but that creeped me out. It is terrifying. Starting off this countdown, we have the haunted house. In this clip, the Warrens talk about a haunted house that they visited and the creepy things they encountered while there. According to them, someone in the house was using an Ouija board and it opened up a bunch of doors to the spirit world, and that's how it got haunted. Plus, the house was 50 to 60 years old, and for some reason, ghosts like to haunt old houses.
Communication, Tony. There had been doors open through Ouija boards.
That's what I was wondering.
But unlike most times, we do not condone the use of Ouija boards.
Well, guess who was using the Ouija board?
This girl, go down into that hatchway. It was horrible. Both Jennifer and I, at that point together, said, we cannot go. Then there was a boy, and the boy was 8 years old. Now that girl was coming over to care for that boy.
So the young boy and his babysitter were using the Ouija board in the cold cellar and let the spirits into the house. So apparently back in the day, 3 women used to live in the house along with their mother. While they were living there, they were haunted by a ghost that was killed back in the day. They would see apparitions of this young girl smiling. At first, it was just the mom that would see the ghost, but then one of the other women started seeing the ghostly girl as well. In one case, she actually spoke to her.
Then she actually walked over and sat on the bed. I believe there was a conversation between them.
There was a conversation between the 2 of them, and then this dark form who we believe to be the person who perpetrated of this man.
That's when they learned that the house was haunted by the girl that was killed and her murderer. The Ouija board had opened the door and those spirits came back to the house. Now here's an image that the Warrens took while on the property. The ghost also manifested itself into orbs as well. So both the photos you just saw are of real ghosts. In our fourth spot today, we have the Amityville haunting. And if you guys are liking this video so far, then smash that like button because it really helps us out. This is probably one of the most controversial paranormal cases of all time. On November 13th of 1974, Robert Butch Defoe took the lives of his parents and his 2 brothers and 2 sisters. The house was then put up for sale and the Lutz family moved in. And apparently the demon that got Butch to do that horrific deed started to attack this new family. Their doors and cupboards would swing open and close by itself, green slime would ooze from their ceiling, and one time a demonic face with red glowing eyes was seen looking into the house. So on and so on. The Warrens went to investigate and confirmed that the house was haunted. Now I'm sure you've seen the photo of the young boy peering around the corner with scary glowing eyes. Well, let's see what the Warrens have to say about it.
Yes, with infrared film.
Oh, yes.
And it's in the upstairs bedrooms. Just to the left there, you see what looks like a small boy's face looking out with bioluminescent eyes, but it is a diabolical spirit with luminescent eyes that appears in that home to confuse the investigators.
The photo has always given me the creeps. What I didn't know is that that was of an evil spirit.
You think that is an evil spirit, Ed?
Positively. Everything about this house was evil.
Again, this is a controversial case because some people believe that the whole story was fake. In fact, Butch's lawyer, William Weber, admitted that he just made up this whole story along with George Lutz. They created the story over many bottles of wine, they said, so they admitted the house was never really haunted. But then how come the Warrens insisted it was? I don't know, just some food for thought. Also, that photo of the ghost boy, terrifying either way. Coming in at number 3, we have the ghosts in the cathedral.
No, that's...
If you look at this slide now, I want you to see, don't point it out to them.
Don't do that.
Let them see where the man is. There's a man, he's right there in that picture.
I mean, the camera zoom in kind of points out where the ghost is, but if you didn't see it, that is a real life ghost that the Warrens managed to catch on film. Here's a close-up of it if you didn't spot it.
When there he is. See, right in the corner. And you see him, and that's in the cathedral. Now remember that the cathedrals, well, buildings in the United Kingdom are extremely old.
So I clearly see a man in a suit. Hopefully you all see that too. According to the Warrens, tragedy took place in the church and a number of spirits haunt the church. They didn't go into great detail, but back in the day, people actually got burned alive in this church for being part of different Scottish clans, and now their souls haunt it.
I think it was the
McDonald's and the Campbells.
Right?
Yeah, the McDonald's and the Campbells.
And the Campbells were burnt to death in that church, so you can imagine the terrible things that go on there.
Do you think that most hauntings occur like in places like United Kingdom compared to here?
Yes.
Coming in at number 2, we have the Anna Ecklund case. In this next video, we see Ed and Lorraine Warren discussing the Anna Ecklund case. Anna was an American woman who in 1928 became possessed and underwent a number of exorcisms. During her exorcisms, things would happen, like she would hiss or howl like an animal. She would float in the air, and whenever holy water would touch her skin, it would burn her skin right off. Let's see what Ed and Lorraine Warren had to say about this case.
Now this woman was under possession by her own father and devils from the age of 14.
Sadly, her father had taken advantage of her on a number of occasions in which she would try to resist. She didn't want to go along with it, which made him mad and made him start to resent her.
He hated her so much that when he died, he actually possessed her with these devils, right up to the age of 54 when Father Ressinger went to help her. Now she had 30 exorcisms performed, which all failed.
That is incredibly messed up, but that's not all. This woman underwent 30 exorcisms. All of them had failed, so they decided to send her to St. Joseph's Church in Iowa to see if they could get the demons out of her. When she arrived, she was placed on a cot in front of nuns.
They brought the woman to the convent, and the nuns were all stationed around this woman on a cot. Suddenly,
A loud, bellowing, hoarse voice came out of the woman. Terrible obscenities, filthy obscenities came from the woman's mouth, and she rose into the air and went up to the ceiling and clung to the ceiling by her hands and feet.
Literally like the scene in The Exorcist. After that, she had to be tied down to the cot. That's not even the worst part.
And the nuns constantly were throwing holy water at her. This woman, outpours of what looked like spaghetti and human hair came out of her mouth.
That is absolutely disgusting, and apparently she would throw up 20 to 30 times a day. Not only that, but it stunk so bad that the nuns had to take 15-minute shifts with her or else they would fall ill. Imagine how horrific it must have been to be there with Anna and performing this exorcism on her. And in our number one spot today we have The Exorcism. The footage I'm about to share with you is footage of a possessed woman going through an exorcism. It's footage directly from the Warren files. This exorcism footage is 1 hour and 20 minutes long. In fact, the footage had been cut down, so that means they were performing an exorcism for over an hour. I will say though that the footage was blurred by Tony Spira before he uploaded it to his YouTube channel. He did this in order to censor some graphic images, but also for the privacy of this woman. Although it's blurred, we can still see how crazy the woman is acting and can hear the weird noises that she is making. So you can see the woman trying to fight back against the demon that is possessing her, and she's crying out in pain from having this demon fighting to stay in her body.
Find the picture of Michael. Are you alright? She says he's over there. The devil?
So in the footage you can see Tony Spira holding the poor woman as the demon was controlling her. She can't speak, but she's trying to do so. All that's coming out is gasps for air. But at one point she points beyond the camera, and Tony knew that the demon was in the room with them and was situated right where the woman was pointing. It gets even creepier when everyone in the room starts chanting along, trying to get this demon out of her, while Tony holds her head up still.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
It's scary, but it's also really sad. The poor woman was going through so much pain and suffering.
Starting us off at number 5, psychic photos. If you're a fan of our channel, you may remember a video that we did on the eerie objects and artifacts that you can observe at Ed and Lorraine's Occult Museum in Connecticut. Well, here they go into detail about one particular type of creepy object that they have a handful of at their museum: psychic photographs. So what are psychic photographs? According to Ed Warren, a psychic photo is a phenomenon in which a camera, being an impartial witness, captures a ghost on film. But the crazy thing is that the image that you see of the ghost is one that it projects itself, an image of what it believes it looks like. This clip explores how exactly that happens, and the Warrens describe instances in which they've witnessed spirit forms appearing beyond the physical eye. Ed also tells of how he captured the White Lady of Union Graveyard with his camera, one of their most famous images.
We could put the first slide up and look at it. Wow.
Well, there you're seeing your stereotype ghost. Look at the appendage-like arms and legs. You know, when you see these little cute ghosts that are painted and drawn on Halloween, this is your stereotype ghost right here.
And at number 4, the Amityville House. This piece of footage, published by Mysterious World, features Lorraine Warren retelling her experience at the Amityville House. The Warrens in the past had gone to the famous Amityville House. It's one of their most famous cases. It's the place in which a man named Ronald DeFeo Jr. shot and killed 6 family members of his in 1974. And a year later, a new family, the Lutz family, had moved into the residence, only to be terrorized by a violent demonic presence. The Warrens had visited the house in an attempt to help the Lutz family, part of which was adapted into the 2016 movie The Conjuring 2. In this video clip, we get more insight on what the real-life events that occurred there were like. Lorraine tells her interview that, I quote, "Places like Amity, if you gave me $1 billion, I wouldn't go in that house again, because it messed up my life and my husband's life." She also tells the interviewer that the Amityville house was where she levitated, which is pretty creepy. And at number 3, the effects of seeing a ghost. This 7-minute video features Ed and Lorraine Warren alongside a guest of theirs named Rod. Rod had seen multiple ghosts and has a discussion discussion with the paranormal experts about the aftermath of seeing a ghost and how it affects one's life. He goes on to explain the intense sorrow that he felt after seeing the ghost, which just so happened to be the White Lady of Union graveyard. He experienced night terrors, was extremely upset, and had excessive tremors for months, reoccurring whenever he was reminded of the event. Ed goes on to explain that the sadness that Rod felt is something called radiotelethesis, which happens when a human picks up on the emotions of a spirit when they have a close physical encounter. The fact that something like this could occur to any individual is pretty darn creepy.
A good friend of mine had died, and a couple nights after that, sitting in my bedroom, I saw the figure of a woman in front of my windows. So my bed was on this end of the room and my windows were there. And from the light coming in, I could see a woman sitting looking out my bedroom window, and where the window ended, that's where the figure ended.
And at number 2, the Borley Rectory. The Borley Rectory is said to be one of the most haunted places in the UK. A nun had been buried within the walls of its church, and once found was moved to a nearby graveyard. But ever since, there's been some serious haunting. According to this video though, Ed and Lorraine have been to that location over 200 times. Talk about courage. The duo discussed their first experience at Borley Church in 1976, with Lorraine saying that the investigator that she was with, who was very skeptical to begin with, was assaulted by a spirit, claiming he could not breathe, and that something was pushing him. Later on, they listened back to the audio that they were recording while they were there. Lorraine said that you could hear a woman's voice over his screaming, saying the words, "Hit him, hit him." And finally, in at number 1, poltergeists. In this clip from a documentary, Ed and Lorraine talk about poltergeists and their dangers. It features a clip of them that they recorded with a family in Connecticut dealing with a poltergeist, with the family's face blurred out in order to give them privacy. It starts off with the group saying prayers, and then Ed tries to communicate with the spirit. We hear the spirit making banging noises in response. Ed proceeds to ask the spirit who it doesn't like, listing off each individual in the family. It finally answers yes via the knocking to the family's mother. Then Ed confronts the poltergeist on his own, and we see chairs and furniture moving around the room. The video continues, showing a clip of the family's little girl being bothered by the poltergeist, who moves the chair that she's sitting on. The Warrens would then later call a priest to perform an exorcism, which wasn't on camera. Arguably, you can see why. Although by the end of the clip, the two of them note that there's no way of knowing if a poltergeist may or may not come back to haunt the family.
In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to reveal your identity.